Ramsuratkumar ki jai. Sarvam Yogi Ramsuratkumar arpanamastu. Like every day, we shall submit our gratitude, our grateful pranams at the lotus feet of Bhagwan for this opportunity of chanting His name, singing His name once again. Let us acknowledge that this is no small grace, but an opportunity we have to celebrate. As usual, we shall see one or two drops from the ocean of Kripa, ocean of grace, the ocean of Leelas of Bhagwan. We will not be able to appreciate the depth of an experience of a devotee unless we get into the groove and experience, feel in the heart, relive the whole episode. Now, Maheshwari Ramraj from Shivakasi. A slightly different story. Since we have been seeing varieties of circumstances in which Bhagwan comes to the rescue of the devotee in different ways. She was married for 5 years, but with no children now, and she was longing for a child. The neighbor, by name Bhagyam, she took her to Shivakasi Bhajan Mandali, run by Srimati Uma Surendra. She was drawn to that. She was drawn to Bhagwan also, and she began to visit regularly every Thursday and participate in the bhajans and Nama Sankirtan there. She enjoyed being there, singing Bhagwan's Nama, but then the whole thing came to an abrupt halt because those people shifted the house. Maheshwari Ramraj shifted their house to another place and she was unable to come. But now and then, whenever she remembered, she would sing the name of Bhagwan. But then it was not exactly in depth or anything. And then, because she was suffering, she did not have a baby. People advised her to go to Rameshwaram with her husband and do certain rituals there, that at least go and have the darshan and have a dip there in the ocean and then in some specific waters there. So she, her husband Ramraj, and her brother, the three of them started. And it was 2002. The next day was the New Year Day. So when they reached Rameshwaram in the night, about 10:30, they had not made any reservation anywhere for their stay. They thought it was easy, but only when they landed in Rameshwaram, they found the streets full of people, the next day being the New Year day. And what was more, there was every hotel, every lodge was already full. They were going, searching for one that would suit them. In one place, they offered a room for them to stay from 10 o'clock to 5 a.m. But they demanded 500 rupees, which they could not afford. Again, they were on the lookout for a suitable place. It was getting late, it was getting to be 11 o'clock, and still they could not find a place to stay. Imagine 3 people landing there in Rameshwaram, unable to find a place to stay. And suddenly it flashed. She remembered what Srimati Vasuki Amma said to her when she was attending the bhajans there, the bhajan mandali. Whenever you are in difficulty, you need immediate help or guidance or protection, just call out Yogi Ramsuratkumar and see what happens. Now she started, Yogi Ramsuratkumar, Yogi Ramsuratkumar, Yogi Ramsuratkumar, desperately. Please, Yogi Ramsuratkumar, please help me find a good place for the night to stay. And she was going on and on with the Nama chanting, and chanting the name, they reached the end of the street. And there the husband found Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa ashram. He pointed that to her, and then they approached. There seemed to be somebody there, which was in itself a miracle at 11:30, 11 o'clock in the night, who would be available in an ashram. An ashram closes very early. But that day, probably because she was chanting the name, probably because the next day was the New Year day, so many probables. Then here, they found a person, and then they put forth their position. So he said, surprisingly, okay, on humanitarian ground, we can give you a room. We don't usually give rooms to people like this. For you people, let me arrange something. And then they gave an offering of 20 rupees. And they gave a big room with a mat and a pillow. The room was comfortable and large. They were very, very happy because they could find a place like an ashram. And Bhagwan Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa's ashram at that. They were so happy that Bhagwan, as soon as they chanted Bhagwan's name, Bhagwan settled them nicely in an ashram. What more could they ask for? And what was more, the next day morning, 5 o'clock, the same person came and knocked at their door and said, wake up, have a bath soon and come there and attend the bhajans there in the shrine. So again, this was an extra gift for them. So they rushed and participated in the bhajans. And then the same person said, okay, now you people can go, have a dip in the ocean, and then see, have darshan of the deities in the temples around, and then be here by 1 o'clock. We are preparing lunch for you people also. So that was again another gift of grace. They were very happy. So they finished all their darshans, dips, finally came promptly at 1 o'clock to the ashram. And there they found the great sannyasis of Ramakrishna Math seated And they were absolutely thrilled to have food with these great people. Again, Maheshwari thanked Bhagwan heartily for giving this great opportunity. And they had a sumptuous food with those great people. And it was not just food, it was prasad of Bhagwan Sri Ramakrishna. They were very, very grateful. And what was more, the greatest gift of all for her, for Maheshwari, was still waiting. When they returned to Shivakasi, the next month she conceived. And the same year, on October 2nd, Gandhi Jayanti, she gave birth to a baby boy. What a huge gift of grace for them. On the outset, when you look at it, this may be something, this may appear as though the whole thing does not have any depth. But imagine walking the streets in the middle of the night, unable to find a place to stay, and then landing with a huge gift of an ashram, Bhagwan Sri Ramakrishna's ashram, having food with the great sannyasis there. It was gift after gift for her. If you relive this experience with the heart of Maheshwari, then we would know this is no small grace again. How Bhagwan, this is what somebody was said that day commenting, whether you have faith or not, whether you have deep devotion or not, at mere calling out the name Yogi Ramsuratkumar, magic follows. Magic happens. So when Maheshwari called out with devotion and in desperation, she enjoyed hugely the grace gift of Bhagwan, and then she knew that she had found the greatest gift of all, the gift of Bhagwan's Nama for life, for any situation. A slightly different story again. This is from Salem, one Bhuvana Balachandar. She says that after she heard about this Nenuda story of Shri Perumal Rajvaiya, that was once Bhagwan Yogi Ramsuratkumar told Shri Perumal Rajvaiya to ask Tirupati Venkatachalapathy when he visited there, who the beggar of Tiruvannamalai was. And Shri Perumal Rajvaiya visited the place, visited Tirupati Venkatachalapathy. Just as Bhagwan said, Bhagwan had given him a 10 paise coin also to be dropped into the hundi there. And so as he was approaching the pot of offering, he remembered to ask, Venkatesha, who is that Swamiji? He could not bring himself to say beggar, like Bhagwan said, but he said, who is the Swamiji of Tiruvannamalai? And then suddenly his whole body, his whole being underwent deep vibrations, intense, powerful, divine vibrations. And the vibrations soon gathered into a specific sound And the sound was Nenuda, Nenuda, Nenuda. Verily myself, verily myself, verily myself. So you see, after she heard the story, suddenly she felt a deep attraction to the place because it's been several years since she visited Tirupati. And now she felt a deep desire to go there. So the whole family, she and her husband Balachandra and the daughter Bindu, the three of them planned to spend 1 week, the Deepavali holidays, there in Tirupati, having darshan of Sri Venkatachalapathy every day. For that they had to book, and there was a counter there in Salem, Tirupati Devasthanam counter. The temple authorities of Tirupati were running a counter there for booking. So these people, 1 or 2 months before, they went in the morning 8 o'clock, and there was a long queue. They joined, and then and then Bhuvana was thinking, it's a long queue. It will be afternoon before we get to the counter. So what do we do? It's going to take a long time. Suddenly, she was also chanting. They were devotees of Bhagwan, and therefore they were chanting. She was also, for everything for her, for Bhuvana, Balachandra, only Bhagwan's Nama. Especially Balachandra was very rooted in Bhagwan's Nama, the faith in Bhagwan. So suddenly Balachandra found some people standing near the counter, well known to Bhuvana. So he came and said, Bhuvana, look, there are people whom you know. Maybe that would help. And then Bhuvana immediately approached those people and said, because their daughter was running temperature. So she went and asked them that the daughter is running temperature. We have been here and it's a long queue. Is it possible for us to join you here? They did not object, so she joined there. And then, even then, they could only book the room for Deepavali. They could not book the tickets for the bus that would carry them to Tirupati. So for conveyance, they had to find their own means. So after booking for the room, so they immediately went to the railway station and booked tickets for a train. But then they took a risk here because there were no reservation tickets. 125 people were in the waiting list. They took a risk. Something happened when they were standing in the queue near the counter. All of a sudden, from nowhere, a butterfly came. And the butterfly came specifically towards Bhuvana and her husband. And then the butterfly flew up to their daughter and then went away. This was a very sure sign of a blessing from Bhagwan. And Bhuvana and Balachandra knew that Bhagwan had approved of their going to Tirupati, had blessed the trip. So they were very happy. So immediately they rushed. And then even though there were 125 people waiting for reservation, they booked. Somehow, with faith that Bhagwan would help them in the last minute to find berths. And then, when they returned home, soon the trouble started for Bhuvana. Her mother-in-law, she just got up at 2 o'clock in the night and started to complain that she was not feeling well and that she should be immediately rushed to a hospital, be taken care of. So naturally these people were afraid, and then they rushed her to the hospital. And then they found, the doctor said there's nothing wrong with her. There's fear in her, but there's nothing wrong with her. And then they gave her an injection. The doctor was known to them, a relative of her mother-in-law. So she simply gave an injection, a vitamin injection. And again next day, about this time, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, the mother-in-law would get up and be afraid and say, "Oh, something is very wrong with my body, please rush me to the hospital." So this story continued for 3 weeks. Her mother-in-law would start crying. If people said, no, there's no need to go, it's only an injection of vitamin, she would say, "Oh, you people don't want to save me, I would die," this and that. So this really frightened Bhuvana, and she was also banking on her going to Tirupati. Now she was so scared that if something should happen to her mother-in-law, the whole trip would be cancelled. But then her husband said, "Don't worry, Bhagwan came in the form of a butterfly and blessed us. So we will surely go, nothing would happen." He was very firm about it. But then Bhuvana felt she had her misgivings. And then she said, "Okay, I would approach an astrologer and find out about my mother-in-law." The astrologer, to her great shock, said that very soon the mother-in-law would die. Naturally, Bhuvana was more frightened now. She was praying and praying to Bhagwan that nothing of the sort should happen, that they should be able to go to Tirupati as planned, as blessed by him. And then suddenly one day they found rows and rows of butterflies moving through the streets. They had never seen anything like that before. Imagine, as though there was a farm of butterflies near, and all those butterflies were let loose. They were growing one after the other like a procession of butterflies. And she was praying so much, and suddenly she came upon the scene right in front of her house. She knew again it was a blessing from Bhagwan, and that nothing of the sort that she feared would happen. And true to that, her mother-in-law also picked up strength after that, and she did not complain. So finally the day came and they could leave for Tirupati. And again, the wonder of wonders, there were 2 reservation tickets, because until the previous day there was nothing, no berth was available. But just when they approached the train, 2 berths were given to them. Again, they went very comfortably. And the greatest gift of all was when they were all standing in a queue for darshan of Sri Venkatachalapathy himself. People could hardly stand, because it was Deepavali crowd. It was only a fraction of a second for each one. People would be pulled out roughly from the shrine. So they were thinking, my God, hardly any time to stand before him, even to see, have darshan. And then she saw many, many butterflies in the corridors of the Tirupati temple, and again she felt assured that Bhagwan was going to help her. And immediately her heart was filled with gratitude, love, devotion, that she forgot Venkatachalapathy completely, and her heart was filled with Yogi Ramsuratkumar. So much so, when Bhuvana stood before Sri Venkatachalapathy, she cried out, "Yogi Ramsuratkumar." Everybody was crying out, "Govinda, Govinda." But she was crying out, "Yogi Ram, Yogi Ram, Yogi Ram." And she was crying so much, completely overwhelmed, thrilled and overwhelmed by the darshan. She could only see Yogi Ramsuratkumar, she could only remember Yogi Ramsuratkumar. Her devotion took over. And because of the way she was overwhelmed and crying out, "Yogi Ramsuratkumar," all those people who came to pull her out stopped as if by a magic. And she could have a few minutes of darshan there, unlike anyone else. So she had a very great darshan of Sri Venkatachalapathy, just as she wanted. She says that was the greatest gift of grace from Bhagwan, of all the things that he did for the entire trip. Again, these are all details which people may not think. They are very casual, ordinary, worldly, all right. But if you go through this episode, as Bhuvana did while it happened, you would see, you would be able to feel the blessing force of Bhagwan, how it helped. Every time the tension developed and she would be so frightened that they may not be able to make it, and then something would happen to relieve that, and there was a gift of grace. And finally she made it, and what was more, she could spend quite a few minutes in front of the deity. Everything for her, it was a pilgrimage of grace, from the beginning to the end for her, which deepened her devotion and faith in Bhagwan. So these episodes show again the glory of his name, how it would have been before chanting the name, how it had become after chanting the name, the difference. So that Bhagwan, who made everything possible despite all the odds, all the challenges they had to face, how he made it a successful, a fulfilling trip for them. Now that Bhagwan is here. We have been seeing in the other few days how Bhagwan came to save people who were suffering with a disease, suffering a heart condition, and now the challenges in a trip. Let us pray to him, knowing that he is our only source of hope, solace and succor. Bhagwan, bestow your grace upon this entire humanity in order to free them from the clutches, the terrible clutches of this Rakshasic virus. Please bring back normalcy in every aspect of life in the entire world. And again, Bhagwan, please enter all those medicines announced by the medical researchers so that the vaccines will kill the virus instantly and the world will be free from it forever. And please save us from the downfall of economy. And again, all those soldiers at the borders in defense of our country, please, Bhagwan, let peace prevail there. And also the soldiers who are fighting the disease at the very risk of their lives, soldiers from different departments working in different capacities, laboring day and night. Please give them protection, health, longevity, and all-round well-being of their families, and above all, the migrant workers and the daily wagers, and also people who have lost their job from companies. Where will they go for their food? They have to earn something to feed people at home. And so many people are suffering now because they do not have enough money. Many people are starving. Please help them find a job, help them find some income so that they don't have to starve. And above all, Bhagwan, give us constant remembrance of your name and give us the attitude of gratitude towards your blessing. Let us live our everyday life as instruments in your hands, offering all our activities at your feet. Jai Yogi Ramsuratkumar.